Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I am picking up on an ongoing series that we teach called A Witch's Poisons in Depth, and I am specifically continuing the video I just recently posted on Hellebore. I will go ahead and link somewhere up here to the etymology and history of Hellebore. And then today we're going to be getting into the effects on the body, how poisonous and harmful is Hellebore really, and the medicinal uses. I want to remind everyone that these classes are taught as a matter of historical interest and religious interest. They do teach for a seminary on witchcraft, and that these in no way constitute medical advice. Please take that warning seriously because I am discussing poisons. As usual, all of my sources are available upon request. You can email us at staff@sanctumofthecraft.org to ask for those sources. And patrons did receive this as, all of my notes on this topic. Patrons at the $30 and up level will actually be receiving this as a book. So keep that in mind. Find us on Patreon at Sanctum of the Craft. And please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. As with the previous class on Hellebore, because so much of the information I could find was just on Hellebore in general, and I was lucky if it even clarified whether it meant true Hellebore, so something in Helleboris, or if it was talking about something in Veratrum, like Veratrum album. I definitely ran into a problem where I couldn't find stuff that was specifically Helleboris niger, Helleboris foetidus, Helleboris viridis, Helleboris orientalis. Where relevant, where I could actually find something distinguishing it, I do say which Hellebore, but I'm just sort of covering all of them in general, and then specifically those when I could find specific research. All right, I think that's everything I needed to say before I could get into this. Nope, I was wrong. One more warning. Okay, so this class has some trigger warnings. We will be discussing really horrible things that happen to your body if you ingest this poisonous plant or have certain kinds of contact with it. We'll be talking about incidents of poisoning, some of which are funny, some of which are not. We will be talking about medical things, so keep in mind all of those content warnings. And I'm really sorry, I totally forgot to put content warnings on the history section. I will be going back and adding those. All right, now we can get into it. The effects of Hellebore on the body. Hellebore can cause tinnitus, vertigo, stupor, thirst, anaphylaxis, a feeling of suffocation, swelling of the tongue, swelling of the throat, catharsis, gastroenteritis, violent emesis, hematemesis, bradycardia, premature ventricular contraction, atrioventricular conduction defects, ventricular tachydysrhythmia, hyperkalemia, cardiac arrest, and death. External contact with the bruised or broken plant can irritate the skin or burn the eyes, up to ulceration, skin ulcers. Poisoning via Hellebore produces clinical findings similar to cardioactive steroid poisoning or contact with certain species of venomous frogs. The symptoms of poisoning have a variable latency period that depends on the quantity ingested. So basically what that means is that the symptoms appear on a different time scale depending on how much a person ingested. How poisonous, how harmful. Toxicity of hellebores depends on the degree of maturity or phenophase, leaf, flowering, fruiting, from plant organism. Accumulation of toxic substances takes place in the leaf, fruit, seeds, or underground organs, and whether it is used fresh or dried. So what this means is that depending upon where it was grown, the conditions that it grew under, and what stage of growth it is at, and whether it was dried or fresh, Hellebore's toxicity varies. Depending on the specific species of Hellebore and the conditions under which it is grown, the extracts and individual fractions of Hellebore exhibit varying strength and toxicity. Additionally, the mechanism of action in most cases is not sufficiently precisely examined, described, or it's just completely unknown. There are currently 12 primary known compounds of interest that have been isolated in various species of Hellebore, with 7 coming from the rhizome, 1 from the plant, and 4 from the flower. Hellebore contains the toxic glycosides helleborin, helleborsen, helleborine, and helleborigenin. Helleborine is a potent narcotic that has a burning and acrid taste. Hellebrin is a digitolic, narcotic, and violent purgative, as well as a cardiac glycoside. Helleborsen has a sweetish taste and is a highly active cardiac poison, similar in its effects to digitalis. It is also a drastic purgative. There is also an aglycone of hellebrin, which is helleborigenin, which is an even more potent cardiotoxic compound. Hellebores also contain secondary metabolites such as bufadienolides, flavonoids, and phenolic heterosides. Other constituents are resin, fat, and starch. No tannin is present. Hellebores also contain a toxin called protoanemine, sometimes called aneminol or ranunculol, in varying amounts according to the species. Protoanemine occurs in all plants of the buttercup family, Ranunculaceae, which I can say, I promise. When the plant is wounded or macerated, the unstable glucoside found in the plant, ranunculin, is enzymatically broken down into glucose and the toxin protoanemine. This has an acrid taste and can cause burning of the eyes, mouth, and throat, as well as oral ulceration, gastroenteritis, and hematemesis. The ranunculin, and therefore protoanemine, is found on the outside of the plant, including areas such as the leaves, stems, flowers, and sap. The roots of all hellebores are potentially fatal. However, research in the 1970s CE found that the roots of Hellebores niger do not contain the cardiotoxic compounds helleborin, hellebrin, and helleborine that are responsible for the lethal reputation of black hellebore. It is possible that earlier studies that claimed black hellebore was the most poisonous of all the hellebores may have used a commercial preparation containing a mixture of material from other species, such as Hellebores viridis, the green hellebore, which does contain those compounds in its roots. Studies on the toxicity. Studies on the toxicity of hellebore have revealed that in addition to the well-known and well-documented poisonous effects of various hellebores, hellebore also has a cytotoxic, cytostatic, and genotoxic effect on human cells. For a thorough review of modern studies on the toxicity of hellebore, I recommend reading Helleboris, an ethnopharmacological and toxicological review, which was enormously helpful to me while constructing this class. Cases, also called incidents of poisoning. In modern times, as hellebore has fallen out of fashion as an herbal remedy, hellebore poisoning has become quite rare, but it does still occur. Hellebore tends to be left alone by animals as the plant is distasteful to them. Unlike some other species, it does not have visually appealing or appetizing fruits that would lead to accidental poisoning in children. A 38-year-old woman recovered from ingestion of Helleboris viridis buds that she misidentified as wild asparagus after administration of lidocaine, magnesium sulfate, and potassium chloride. Note that the actual medical article on that incidence's conclusion contains the amusing advice, translated from Italian, that the authors conclude that in case of patient with threatening arrhythmias of unknown genesis, it is useful to pay attention to the wild vegetables ingestion. Basically, when someone shows up with symptoms of poisoning and has no idea what might have poisoned them, ask if they harvest their own food from the wild, if they forage, if they wildcraft, because chances are they misidentified something and accidentally poisoned themselves. The poisonous alkaloids have been found to affect gardeners with sensitive skin. There are reported cases of skin burns following prolonged handling of hellebores in order to extract the seeds. Always wear gloves when extracting hellebore seeds. In May 2010, a person harvested seeds of a Helleborus foetidus while away from home. That's the stinking hellebore. The person then put them in their back pocket and sat on the seeds to drive home, a 2.5-hour drive. During that time, the damp, heat, pressure, and friction extracted the ranunculin and converted it to protoanemine, which was sufficient to burn the person through 2 layers of clothing. So this person got essentially burns on their ass, chemical burns on their ass, because they sat on the seeds in their back pocket. So always bring a collection bag, always wear gloves. Outcome and management, also called clinical treatment. In cases of hellebore poisoning via ingestion, clinical treatment involves inducing vomiting and performing gastric lavage, followed by ingestion of activated charcoal and a saline cathartic. The heart rate should be monitored, as should serum potassium. Atropine or transvenous pacing may be used to correct the heart rate. For those of you who don't know this, atropine is actually extracted from Atropa belladonna. So this is fascinating to me, that you can use the extract of one incredibly poisonous plant to save someone's life from a different incredibly poisonous plant. So I love that. I love when one poison corrects for another poison. It's something that I watch for when I'm constructing these classes, when I'm writing these books. So that's fun to me. If potentially lethal cardioactive steroid toxicity is possible, digoxin immune fab or digoxin specific antibody may be given as an antidote. It is made from immunoglobulin fragments from sheep that have been immunized with the digoxin derivative. Its brand names include Digibind and Digifab. So this is, again, they're feeding sheep digoxin. So, poison saving us from poisons. Right. Medicinal uses. All hellebores have been observed to have some degree of immunostimulative or immunomodulatory effect. One glycoside, helebrin, that is found in hellebores is anti-carcinomic. I can talk, even though my cats are being really distracting. A derivative of optimized halarigenin may specifically be able to combat gliomas, melanomas, renal cell carcinomas, and some other forms of cancer specifically, though the cytotoxic effects of the cardiac glycoside are still not fully deciphered yet. So we're still studying this, well, not me, but other scientists. An aqueous fermented extract of Hellebore's niger that contains steroidal saponins was also found in clinical studies to affect the ability of cancerous tumors to grow their own blood vessels. The current investigations verify significant anti-proliferative, anti-angiogenetic, and migration inhibiting effects. To translate that, they found that this saponin, this compound extracted from Hellebore's niger when injected into cancerous tumors, prohibited the cancer from being able to grow blood vessels, and therefore it couldn't proliferate, it couldn't spread, it couldn't migrate to other areas of the body, which is just amazing. Now, again, this is still in clinical study form. This does not mean at all to go make a fermented aqueous solution of Hellebore's niger and inject it into yourself to fight cancer. Please don't do that. It won't work correctly. This is still in clinical studies, so, be smart about things. Hellebores contain the cardiotoxic bufadienolide heterozids, which in some doses act toxic to the heart, but in other doses act as cardiotonics. Hellebores are also being investigated for their original use in Greek medicine, curing madness. Hellebore may stimulate mental and physiological functions in neurological and mental regression and may be used in the treatment of psychosis, which is fascinating. Hellebore niger has traditionally been used as a heart stimulant for the elderly, though this treatment is no longer in popular use. In traditional herbal medicine, the root is anthelmintic, antiparasitic, cardiac, cathartic, diuretic, emetic, emmenagogue, irritant, narcotic, and a violent purgative. It has been used in the treatment of dropsy, headache, enteritis, amenorrhea, nervous disorders, and hysteria. The roots of Hellebore bocanii, subspecies siculus, are widely used in veterinary folk medicine in Sicily as a treatment for lower respiratory tract infections in cattle. The roots of Hellebore bocanii, subspecies siculus and subspecies intermedius were found to contain substances with antibacterial activity, with Hellebore bocanii subspecies intermedius specifically showing action inhibitory to Staphylococcus epidermalis and Staphylococcus aureus. So that's really cool. It turns out that in Sicily, this folk medicine says that this treats these infections, and it might. Hellebore viridis has been traditionally used as, so again, this is in traditional folk medicine, historical medicine, not clinical studies, as an anthelmintic, an antiparasitic, a cardiac, a cathartic, diuretic, emetic, emmenagogue, hypotensive, irritant, narcotic, and again as a violent purgative. The toxic alkaloids obtained from its rhizome have been traditionally used as a nervine, a pseudonervine, and a veratridine. Hellebore foetidus in traditional folk medicine has been used for its ability to reduce hypertension. It is also nervine, pseudonervine, and vetratidine. The root is anthelmintic, cardiac, cathartic, diuretic, emetic, emmenagogue, irritant, narcotic, and again, a violent purgative, or at least that's what traditional folk medicine says that it is. Glycosides from Hellebore odorus have been demonstrated to have an expressive cardiovascular effect, very similar to digitalis, but with less accumulates than the digitalis glycosides. Hellebore odorus is used in veterinary medicine as an antiparasitic, an irritant, and a purgative. For the uterus, as a distinct medical category, as aforementioned in De Materia Medica, Dioscorides listed the ingredients of a draught called abortion wine, either white hellebore, Veratrum album, or black hellebore, Hellebore niger, along with squirting cucumber, Ecbolium elaterium, and scamony, Canvolvulus scamonia, but failed to provide the precise manner in which it was to be prepared. He said that this wine was to be mixed with water and given to a person who had fasted and vomited in the amount of 8 cups. Dioscorides also claimed that the plants, when growing around grapevines, caused the grapes used to make wine to assume the property of the poisonous plants. In Greek medicine, this property, the dynamis, was believed to be able to be absorbed. Like if you put one plant next to another plant, it would absorb the dynamis of the other. In certain cases, this wasn't true of all plants, but it was true of strong. In some cases, with some plants, this was considered true if a plant had a really strong spirit. It could influence another plant that had a weak spirit or an absorbing spirit. Although it is possible that plants grown in proximity to each other may result in alterations in things such as soil chemistry, which may in turn have effects on the internal biochemistry of each organism, there's no evidence that such alterations would in any way reflect the specific nature of the co-planted organism. So basically, is it true that if you plant certain things together, they both do better because one repels the pests, or one is an accumulator. It has a really deep taproot and it draws nutrients up, and then you can use that as compost for your other plants? Is it true that some plants adjust soil pH or are nitrogen fixers? Yeah, absolutely. All of those are true. But like, planting a poisonous plant with a non-poisonous plant will not make the non-poisonous plant poisonous. That's not true. The grapevine could be planted next to either an amaranth or an apple tree and potentially benefit from the mineral accumulation provided, but that would not, alter it in this fashion that they thought happened. Black hellebore contains 2 active glycosides, helleborine and helleborine, that are amenagogic and abortifacient. Black hellebore is not generally used in modern pharmacy as an amenagog or as an abortifacient due to the risks associated. The medicinal dosage recorded for abortion in historical sources is 3 to 5 grains, which is 200 to 300 milligrams in modern terms. This is a dangerous and potentially lethal dose of hellebore, especially if the hellebore that you're using is strong hellebore for whatever reason, because of the conditions under which it's grown, because of how old it is. We already talked about the variable toxicity. So in cases where you read about, ancient abortifacient method, that doesn't mean you should use that. There are networks, if you live somewhere where abortion has just become illegal, that will fly you to places where abortion is not illegal. And even though I teach classes on herbal abortifacients in order to preserve that traditional knowledge, I support legal clinical abortion in all cases, absolutely, over an herbal abortion, because they have so many risks associated with them, and because the primary risk associated with them is death. All right. That's everything. I hope this information proves useful to you in some way or another. And please remember to like this video, leave a comment below, subscribe if you haven't already done so. And thank you so much for your continued support. Be safe out there, everyone.